You ever wake up, look at your electric bill, and realize someone's been robbing you in your sleep? That's exactly what happened when I found out the HOA president, Karen, was secretly plugging her Tesla into my outdoor outlet. Every single night, while I was asleep. My bill? Up by $300. Her reaction when I confronted her? Laughed in my face, told me I was imagining things, said I needed help. So I stopped arguing and started building a smart protection system with logs, audio, voltage traps. And the night her $90,000 Tesla tried to charge one last time and bricked itself right there in my driveway. That was the moment she learned. I don't just fight back, I build consequences. My name's Ethan Bailey. I'm 35 years old, and if I'm being honest, I've always been the type of guy people don't notice until they need something fixed. Quiet, self-reliant. The kind of man who still holds doors open and says yes ma'am out of habit, even when it gets him weird looks. I grew up in a small working-class town in Indiana where the factories were closing faster than they opened, and if you didn't learn to fix things yourself, you just went without. My dad was a diesel mechanic. My mom worked the night shift at the hospital. They didn't have much, but they had work ethic, and they made sure I had it too. My dad would come home with grease up to his elbows and collapse into the same armchair he'd been sitting in since the 80s. My mom would rub his back for 5 minutes before heading off to her shift, exhausted, but never complaining. That was love in our house, showing up. No frills, just grit. I was the first in my family to finish college. Got into Purdue with a full ride, thanks to a mix of good grades, good timing, and one hell of an essay about fixing the church's busted generator during a tornado warning. I worked nights at a loading dock, delivered pizzas on weekends, and took every lab course I could get my hands on. By the time I graduated with a degree in electrical engineering, I knew I wanted something more structured, more meaningful. So I enlisted. 6 years in the Army Corps of Engineers. I specialized in power grid systems and security infrastructure, built bridges, rewired field bases, dealt with sandstorms, equipment shortages, and commanders who wanted miracles with duct tape. I learned how to solve problems under fire, literally and figuratively. It wasn't glamorous, but I was damn good at it. When I got out, I moved west, Seattle. Took a job with a defense contractor turned civilian tech firm. Remote position, good pay, flexible hours. I got a small apartment and spent my weekends hiking, gaming with army buddies, or tinkering in my garage. It wasn't exciting, but it was quiet. Then I met Alyssa. She was a consultant, bright, sharp, fast-talking. She wore heels like armor and could destroy a room with a glance. I was quiet. She was loud. I liked black coffee. She drank triple almond milk, flat whites with cinnamon. Somehow, it worked. For a while. We got married when I was 29. We got a dog, then a townhouse. But city life wasn't for me. I started waking up at 3 a.m., anxious for reasons I couldn't explain. The traffic, the noise, the grind. She loved the city, the energy, the culture, the constant motion. I loved the idea of a backyard, a garage, and neighbors who waved instead of honked. We drifted, slowly, softly. One night, over lukewarm Chinese takeout, we looked at each other and just knew. "We're not unhappy," she said. "We're just not together anymore." We signed the papers a month later. No lawyers, no screaming matches, just a clean break. After the divorce, I spent 2 months living out of boxes. Then I found Pinewood Estates, a quiet HOA-run suburb about 30 minutes outside the city. My house wasn't big. 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, a garage just big enough for my Jeep and my tools. But it had a backyard and silence. I fixed up the place slowly, painted the porch, built shelves in the garage, put up a motion light over the driveway. I started a tomato garden, added a small fire pit, and hung up a wind chime my mom sent me to keep away bad spirits. I laughed at first, then kept it. Maybe part of me believed it would help. Life settled into a rhythm. Work during the day. Weights in the garage. Late-night video games with my old unit. I wasn't looking for excitement, just a place where I could hear myself think. And then she arrived. Deborah Harrington. Correction. President Deborah Harrington, as I'd soon learn to call her. She moved in with the fanfare of a celebrity house tour. The moving truck was white and spotless. 3 men in branded polos unloaded custom crates labeled fragile and artisanal. Her Tesla, gleaming, spotless Model X with falcon wing doors, pulled into the driveway like a royal carriage. The license plate read, "Winning." Her house wasn't next to mine. It was right next to mine, sharing a property line just over the hedges. The fence separating us was the standard HOA-approved vinyl, 6 feet tall, white, and just thin enough for sound to carry through. Deborah herself looked like a woman who hadn't pumped her own gas in 20 years, mid to late 40s, thin, tanned, and taut in all the ways that screamed chemical peel. Her hair, a platinum blonde bob, sat like a helmet. Her clothes were always coordinated. Cashmere sweaters in sunny weather, tight designer yoga pants, oversized sunglasses that made her look like a hawk surveying prey. She walked like the world owed her space. Her voice was a sharp mix of sugar and poison, high-pitched, measured. The kind of tone that said, "I'm not yelling, you're being difficult." The first time we met, I brought over a welcome basket, local IPA, a few artisan chocolates, and a hand-drawn map of the area with notes like "Best Thai Takeout" and "Avoid 6th, though." Street after 4, speed traps. I'm not a social guy, but I believe in manners. My mom would have smacked me upside the head if I hadn't welcomed a new neighbor. She opened the door like I'd knocked during prayer. "Oh, how thoughtful," she said. Her eyes scanned me from boots to brow. "You're from the little gray house with the slope?" "Flat roof," I corrected with a polite smile. "I'm Ethan, right next door." She nodded slowly, as if storing the name for later retaliation. "Well, thank you. That's cute." She took the basket like it was evidence. Not a smile, not a handshake, just that sterile stare. Her home, I'd soon discover, had been fully remodeled. Gutted, she told me during a surprise tour I hadn't asked for. "Previous owners had zero taste. Can you believe they had laminate counters?" Every fixture came with a name and a story. French chandeliers, Italian marble, faucets imported from somewhere I couldn't pronounce. "William insisted," she said more than once. "Only the best for our forever home." William, her husband, was a corporate attorney. I saw him maybe twice a month. Tall, tanned, always on his Bluetooth headset, muttering words like quarterlies and arbitration while speed-walking to his car. When I mentioned I was an engineer, her interest flickered, then vanished. "Oh, how useful." Useful. Like a plunger. 2 weeks later, she was HOA president. No one remembered voting. No one remembered running. Flyers went out. "Evening with the Harringtons." There was wine, charcuterie, jazz. I didn't go. Most did. Within a week, she was running the neighborhood. The previous HOA president, a kind retired school principal named Dorothy, stepped down. "Health reasons," she said. But I later heard Deborah had found out about Dorothy's son's DUI from years ago. She'd threatened to make it public. Charming. Then the notices started. "Mailbox not compliant with approved HOA shade palette." I repainted it. "Trash bins visible from the street beyond 8 a.m. They'd been out for 16 minutes. I moved them. "Hedges exceed maximum height by 2.3 inches. I trimmed them. Again. It wasn't just me. Everyone was feeling it. A couple got fined for bird feeders. A man down the block got cited for a garden gnome that disrupted uniform lawn aesthetics. Deborah ran the HOA like her personal fiefdom. I kept my head down, paid my dues, followed the rules, and then came the electric bill, $452 in April. I stared at it for 5 minutes. My average bill was around $150. I lived alone, no kids, No crazy appliances. I used LED lights, energy-efficient everything. I hadn't even used the garage heater that month. I called the electric company. No error, they said. Same reading on our end. I walked the house, room by room, checking every outlet, every breaker. Nothing unusual. Until 2:13 a.m. Thursday morning, motion alert. I opened the app, camera feed loaded, zoomed. There she was, Deborah Harrington. Silk pajamas, slippers, dragging a thick orange extension cord along the hedges, the ones she had the HOA plant. She plugged the cord into my outdoor outlet, the one I used for yard tools. She looked both ways, then disappeared. I rewound, watched her plug the other end into her Tesla. She was charging her car, on my power. The next morning, I knocked on her door, calm, controlled. She answered in tennis gear, holding a smoothie the color of algae. "Deborah," I said, "we need to talk." "Oh?" She blinked innocently. "You've been using my outlet, charging your car. I have the footage." I held up the phone, hit play. Her smile didn't budge. "That could be anyone." I stared at her, full face, full view. "And honestly," she said, turning away, "if your electrical system is that fragile, perhaps you should consider upgrading. We do want to maintain property values." She paused in her doorway. "Also, your hedges? Still an inch too high? Expect a notice." The door clicked shut. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't about power. It was about entitlement. And Deborah Harrington had just made the biggest mistake of her life. The morning after our first confrontation, I stood in my garage, coffee in hand, staring at the hedge that separated our two properties. Just beyond it sat a silent white Tesla, gleaming in the sunlight like it hadn't just stolen from me for weeks. I couldn't get her smile out of my head. That thin, dismissive little curve of her lips. The way she acted like I was the problem. Like I was the one in the wrong for daring to question her suburban sovereignty. That kind of arrogance doesn't come naturally. It's practiced, perfected, weaponized. She had the clipboard, the board, the whispers, the wardrobe, and I had a garden hose and an overpriced power bill. But I also had time. By mid-morning, I was outside trimming my hedges, just to deny her the satisfaction of another violation. I wore safety glasses, gloves, and old Army-issue boots. My focus was sharp, like I was defusing a bomb. My hands worked in practiced, rhythmic motions, the kind that come from years of handling delicate circuits and heavy-duty equipment alike. The hum of the trimmer drowned out my thoughts until I felt eyes on me. Halfway through trimming, I saw her. She was standing at the edge of her perfectly landscaped yard holding a clipboard. Yes, a literal clipboard. She was wearing another one of her seemingly endless supply of cashmere sweaters, this one buttercream yellow paired with stark white slacks and matching espadrilles. Her oversized sunglasses reflected the morning sun, turning her into some suburban deity with a hunger for control. Even her posture had that subtle aggression. One leg slightly forward, arms tight around her notes, lips pursed just enough to suggest judgment without words. She didn't wave, didn't speak. Just watched me for a moment before making a little mark on her paper. I paused. "You writing me up again?" She smiled. "Oh no, Ethan. Just making notes. We're doing a seasonal inspection this week. Standard procedure." "Funny," I said, turning back to the hedge. "Nobody mentioned that in the last HOA email." "There are a lot of things people miss when they don't read carefully," she replied sweetly. That moment stuck in my mind. It wasn't just what she said. It was how she said it. The words came out polished but sharp, coated in sugar but dipped in poison. She had perfected the art of controlling without appearing controlling, and everything about her posture said, "I own this street." An hour later, I received a letter in my mailbox, hand-delivered, not mailed. HOA stationery, official tone. "You are in violation of Section 14B, Unauthorized exterior modifications. Installation of outlet covers must be pre-approved by the board and conform to neighborhood aesthetic standards. Please remove these covers within 48 hours to avoid further fines. Outlet covers. Locking outlet covers, the ones I installed after catching her red-handed, charging her Tesla using my power. Covers I'd bought at Home Depot for $15 a piece. Clear. Simple. Functional. Now, apparently, a threat to aesthetic standards. I pulled out the HOA guidelines, sat at my dining room table, lit by late afternoon sun, flipping through page after page of dry legalese, scanned Section 14B. It mentioned large-scale modifications, pergolas, fountains, sheds. Nothing about outlet covers. Still, the threat was clear. This wasn't about rules. This was personal. That evening, as I was rolling my trash bins to the curb, I heard it. Two voices, soft but clear enough in the still evening air. One of Deborah's wine night friends talking to another neighbor. Their tone was hushed, but their words were knives. "I heard Ethan's having some sort of episode," one of them whispered. "Ex-military, you know. They say he's been up at night installing cameras, watching Deborah's house." "Poor thing," Deborah replied. "He's just struggling, I think. It's sad." I froze, stood behind the hedge, breath held. There it was. The first crack in my reputation. She wasn't just playing the HOA system, she was poisoning the well, turning suspicion into truth by sheer repetition, playing the long game. And the terrifying part? It was working. I stood in my kitchen that night, staring out the window. Lights were on in Deborah's house, warm, cozy, inviting. Probably candles lit. Some scented diffuser humming with eucalyptus and power. Meanwhile, I sat alone, in silence, drinking black coffee at 10 p.m. because I couldn't sit still. This woman wasn't a Karen. She was a tactician. And if I wasn't careful, she wouldn't just ruin my utility bill. She'd ruin my life. So I stayed awake, reviewing footage, rereading HOA regulations, double-checking timestamps on every alert from my security system, and slowly, steadily, I started logging everything. Time, 2:47 a.m. Movement detected near Western Hedge. Subject, Deborah Harrington. Activity, extension cord retrieval. Time, 7:12 p.m. Deborah stands at her mailbox for 6 minutes, appears to take photos of my yard. Time, 10:35 a.m. Second clipboard inspection. Unconfirmed notes made. It wasn't paranoia. It was data. And it was building. The next day I got a visit. Gregory Palmer, HOA inspector. He pulled up in a spotless gray sedan, wearing a pressed polo shirt and khakis, clipboard in hand. Thin, mid-50s, with slicked back hair and a fake tan that didn't quite match his neck. He looked like someone who once wore a headset at Best Buy and never emotionally left the job. The kind of man who measures self-worth in procedures and laminated policy binders. He rang my bell like he was serving a subpoena. No hesitation, no warmth. "Mr. Bailey," he said, his tone stiff, "we're here to confirm noncompliance." I stared at him. Noncompliance with what, exactly? He motioned toward the outlet covers. "Unauthorized modifications. We've had a report." "From Deborah?" I asked flatly, already knowing the answer. "I can't disclose that." I narrowed my eyes. "You here as an inspector or her errand boy?" His lips tightened. "Excuse me?" I didn't flinch. "I installed those covers after discovering someone tapping into my electricity. I've got video evidence. You want to see it?" He shifted, uncomfortable now. "Private disputes between neighbors aren't under HOA jurisdiction, but these covers violate our guidelines." "They don't," I replied, pulling out the printed HOA handbook. "Section 14B applies to major external modifications. A lockable outlet box isn't a pergola. Show me where it says otherwise." Gregory flipped through his clipboard like he was searching for a ghost, then glanced past me to Deborah's Tesla, visible just over the hedge, and back again. You have 48 hours to remove them. He turned and walked away like a man dodging a mirror. But just before stepping into his car, the sunlight caught something on his wrist. A watch. Shiny. Designer. Way out of place on someone whose job paid HOA stipend peanuts. I stood on my porch, fists clenched, heart pounding. Not out of fear. Out of clarity. This wasn't about rules. It never was. This was a setup. And Deborah had orchestrated it beautifully. That afternoon, while trying to unclench the tension from my shoulders, I walked the block. Not out of paranoia, but necessity. I needed air. Space. That's when I ran into Mrs. Gibson. She was always kind. A retired nurse, soft-spoken, lived 2 doors down in a house with seasonal wreaths and sunflowers painted on her mailbox. We'd chatted once or twice over mulch deliveries. But today, she looked different. Uncomfortable. "Ethan, is everything all right?" she asked cautiously. I tilted my head. "Yeah. Why?" She hesitated. "I heard some things, from a few neighbors, that you've been, well, watching Deborah. Setting up cameras. At night." I blinked. "I have security cameras. For my property." She winced. Of course you do. I told them that. I said you'd never—" I cut her off gently. "I appreciate it, truly." She smiled awkwardly, then walked on, holding her grocery bag like it contained live snakes. I stood there on the curb, stunned. The gossip had taken root. She was painting me as unstable, dangerous, watching her. And it was working. The next 48 hours passed in a fog. No new letters, no knocks, just silence. But it wasn't peace. It was the kind of quiet that hums, that creeps under your door at night and whispers in your sleep. I noticed things, shades drawn when I stepped outside. Conversations cut short mid-sentence. A group of kids playing hopscotch suddenly retreating when I came down the driveway. Even the mailman, always chatty, now simply nodded, head down, delivering letters like they were explosives. And then there was Deborah, watering flowers that didn't exist, repositioning bird feeders every 20 minutes, adjusting the same garden gnome 6 times in a day. She floated along the edge of her lawn like a monarch inspecting the border, always lingering near the property line, always within earshot, but never speaking. She didn't need to speak. Her silence was louder than any confrontation. Her presence alone kept me boxed in, and every time I looked up, I saw her watching. Not obviously, never direct, but always just a little too still, a little too staged. It was psychological warfare, and it was brilliant. I went back inside, pulled the outlet covers off, not out of surrender, out of strategy. Because sometimes the strongest move in a battle isn't to attack, it's to disarm. Let them feel victorious. Let them gloat. Let them get careless. There's a principle in combat called the tactical pullback. It's when you concede ground to gain information, to let the enemy think they've won. And in that false sense of victory, they expose their weakest points. Deborah thought she'd won. She thought I was retreating, folding. She hadn't realized yet. I was recording everything. Logs, movement, energy pull, facial recognition snapshots. The system I had designed was passive, for now, but it was listening. And soon it would speak. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was anxious, because I was awake, alert, alive, because Deborah had crossed a line. She didn't just steal electricity, she tried to rewrite my identity, turned me into the villain of her HOA fairy tale. But she forgot something. Villains always get the best comebacks. They thought I'd fold, that I'd fall in line. But I don't fold. I don't back down. And I sure as hell don't lose sleep over people who mistake quiet for weakness. The morning after I took down the outlet covers, The sun rose slow and heavy over Pinewood Estates. The air felt different, denser, as if the neighborhood itself had become complicit in the game Deborah was playing. But I was ready. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that the moment I took off those covers, I'd activated something far more effective. I called it SPPS, Smart Power Protection System. Built from industrial-grade components, coded from scratch, and rigged with sensors designed to detect abnormal current draw, log patterns, and trigger silent alerts. It didn't just monitor electricity, it monitored behavior. I mounted it discreetly, hidden beneath a utility panel near my garage. Wires ran just below the siding, tucked under trim. A high-resolution thermal camera positioned to catch motion along the fence line. It didn't need to see faces, it watched heat. For the first 24 hours, nothing happened. She didn't come, no activity, just the hum of summer and the faint rattle of sprinklers 2 houses down. I pretended to work. Sat in my garage like always, tinkering with a drone project I hadn't touched in months, hands busy while my mind stayed sharp. On the second night at 2:09 a.m., the system pinged. Alert. Foreign plug-in detected. Voltage spike, external port. Time, 2:09:31. I opened the console, watched the real-time display. Draw, 7.4 kilowatt-hour. Location, western exterior outlet. Duration, 13 minutes. Subject temperature, 98.3 degrees. There she was. I didn't need a face. The signature matched. Deborah had returned. Plugged in, charged, and left. The next morning, I logged the data. Unauthorized use detected. Duration of draw, time signature, amp spikes, weather conditions, noise threshold from mic input, 38 dB, whispered voice range. Everything logged, tagged, archived. And so began the pattern. She'd come every second or third night, always between 1:45 a.m. and 3:15 a.m., never more than 20 minutes, always alone, sometimes in a robe, once in a puffy coat over pajamas. Her footsteps always the same, light, hasty, strategic, and the neighborhood still silent. Kids rode bikes like nothing was wrong. Parents smiled in the mornings. HOA emails kept arriving. Fall flower suggestions, upcoming HOA pancake brunch, the same nonsense, distractions, filler noise. But behind the curtain, the war continued. She thought she'd buried me, discredited me. What she didn't realize was that each time she crept into my yard like a thief in cashmere, she was feeding me evidence. I expanded the system, added another sensor to monitor my circuit breaker box, another microphone aimed at the common path between our houses, a directional audio filter, crude but effective, that isolated mid-range frequencies to pick up quiet speech. And what I caught? Her voice. One night, just past 3 a.m. after plugging in, she whispered to herself, "He better not say anything. I'll get him expelled from the board. I'll say he threatened me. They'll believe me. They always believe me." I played it back 3 times, then saved it. Her pattern didn't change, but mine did. During the day, I started seeing the neighborhood again. I wasn't hiding anymore. I trimmed my bushes with my headphones in, repainted my mailbox, smiled politely at Gregory when he walked past. I waved at Deborah once when she lingered at her mailbox, pretending to sort envelopes she'd already opened. Her expression? Tense, controlled. But her hand trembled just a little when she turned away. I spent evenings backing up my data onto cloud storage. One on Dropbox, one on a private server, another drive hidden in the lining of my garage bench. Every night before bed, I checked the logs. Every morning, I reviewed footage. Every afternoon, I walked the fence line, sipped coffee, and waited for the next strike. She tried again to bait me. Once, she passed by and remarked loudly to her friend, "It must be so exhausting living next to someone who doesn't value community standards." But I didn't bite. I just smiled, because the system had recorded her latest charge time, 2:04 a.m. Draw, 8.1. Kilowatt, voltage irregularity, mild surge. Ambient audio. He won't do anything. Men like that never do. She had no idea what I was doing, what I was building, what I was becoming. Not vengeful, prepared. And I wasn't just documenting her behavior, I was studying it. Psychological warfare is about rhythms, patterns, reactions. Deborah was a creature of habit, masked as a master manipulator. But every predator leaves tracks, and I was mapping every single one. She didn't know it yet, but every time she crept across the yard, she wasn't charging her Tesla. She was charging my case. And soon, her battery wouldn't be the only thing drained. The morning after I took down the outlet covers, the sun rose slow and heavy over Pinewood Estates. The air felt different, denser, as if the neighborhood itself had become complicit in the game Deborah was playing. But I was ready. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that the moment I took off those covers, I'd activated something far more effective. I called it SPPS, Smart Power Protection System. Built from industrial-grade components, coded from scratch and rigged with sensors designed to detect abnormal current draw, log patterns, and trigger silent alerts. It didn't just monitor electricity, it monitored behavior. I mounted it discreetly, hidden beneath a utility panel near my garage. Wires ran just below the siding, tucked under trim. A high-resolution thermal camera positioned to catch motion along the fence line. It didn't need to see faces. It watched heat. For the first 24 hours, nothing happened. She didn't come. No activity, just the hum of summer and the faint rattle of sprinklers 2 houses down. I pretended to work. Sat in my garage like always, tinkering with a drone project I hadn't touched in months, hands busy while my mind stayed sharp. On the second night, at 2:09 a.m., the system pinged. Alert, foreign plug-in detected. Voltage spike, external port. Time, 2:09:31. I opened the console, watched the real-time display. Draw, 7.4 kilowatt-hour. Location, western exterior outlet. Duration, 13 minutes. Subject temperature, 98.3 degree. There she was. I didn't need a face. The signature matched. Deborah had returned, plugged in, charged, and left. The next morning, I logged the data. Unauthorized use detected. Duration of draw, time signature, amp spikes, weather conditions, noise threshold from mic input, 38 dB, whispered voice range. Everything. Logged, tagged, archived. And so began the pattern. She'd come every second or third night, always between 1:45 a.m. and 3:15 a.m. Never more than 20 minutes, always alone, sometimes in a robe, once in a puffy coat over pajamas. Her footsteps always the same, light, hasty, strategic. And the neighborhood, still silent. Kids rode bikes like nothing was wrong. Parents smiled in the mornings. HOA emails kept arriving. Fall flower suggestions. Upcoming HOA pancake brunch. The same nonsense, distractions, filler noise. But behind the curtain, the war continued. She thought she'd buried me, discredited me. What she didn't realize was that each time she crept into my yard like a thief in cashmere, she was feeding me evidence. I expanded the system, added another sensor to monitor my circuit breaker box, another microphone aimed at the common path between our houses, a directional audio filter, crude but effective, that isolated mid-range frequencies to pick up quiet speech. And what I caught? Her voice. One night just past 3 a.m., after plugging in, she whispered to herself, "He better not say anything. I'll get him expelled from the board. I'll say he threatened me. They'll believe me. They always believe me." I played it back 3 times, then saved it. Her pattern didn't change, but mine did. During the day, I started seeing the neighborhood again. I wasn't hiding anymore. I trimmed my bushes with my headphones in, repainted my mailbox, smiled politely at Gregory when he walked past. I waved at Deborah once when she lingered at her mailbox, pretending to sort envelopes she'd already opened. Her expression? Tense. Controlled. But her hand trembled just a little when she turned away. I spent evenings backing up my data onto cloud storage, one on Dropbox, one on a private server, another drive hidden in the lining of my garage bench. Every night before bed, I checked the logs. Every morning, I reviewed footage. Every afternoon, I walked the fence line, sipped coffee, and waited for the next strike. She tried again to bait me. Once she passed by and remarked loudly to her friend, "It must be so exhausting living next to someone who doesn't value community standards." But I didn't bite. I just smiled, because the system had recorded her latest charge time. 2:04 a.m. Draw, 8.1 kilowatts, voltage irregularity, mild surge, ambient audio. He won't do anything. Men like that never do. She had no idea what I was doing, what I was building, what I was becoming, not vengeful, prepared. And I wasn't just documenting her behavior. I was studying it. Psychological warfare is about rhythms, patterns, reactions. Deborah was a creature of habit, masked as a master manipulator. But every predator leaves tracks, and I was mapping every single one. By week 3, my logs were so detailed they could have passed as scientific research. I had graphs, heat maps, usage charts, voltage irregularities noted down to the second. I started simulating her behavior, predicting her visits. And I was always right. There's a moment when confidence shifts in a chess game. Not when the king falls, but when your opponent realizes they've already lost. I started seeing that moment in her posture, at the mailbox, in the way she cut her walks short. Her smile never changed, but her eyes darted more. She lingered less. She knew something was wrong. She just didn't know what. She still came to the HOA meetings, still made passive-aggressive remarks, still signed memos as President Deborah Harrington like she was the mayor of Pleasantville. But her moves became sloppy. She left a cord out one night. Another time, she didn't properly close the outlet cover. Twice, she didn't look both ways before creeping over. I noted it all. And on the 7th visit, something changed. She whispered something new. I should have just paid for the damn charger. Why didn't I? She never finished the sentence, but the mic caught every syllable. That was the crack in the armor. Not guilt, not remorse, regret. And that was all I needed. Because regret means awareness, and awareness means fear. And when someone like Deborah starts to feel fear, it means you're close. The final weeks before everything snapped were somehow the quietest. Not peaceful, no, far from it, but eerily still. The kind of stillness you feel in a building right before a storm hits. Airless, suspended. Deborah didn't stop charging her Tesla, but her visits became twitchy, less confident. Her glances over the shoulder lingered longer. The way she plugged the cord in, how she hunched her shoulders, how her feet shuffled instead of stepped. Those weren't the movements of a queen patrolling her kingdom. Those were the gestures of someone waiting for the floor to collapse. And I just kept collecting. Each ping from the SPPS became a drumbeat, like the countdown to something inevitable. I'd stopped checking them in real time. The system was so precise now, I trusted it completely. Motion alerts, sound spikes, current draw. If a squirrel coughed near that outlet, I'd know. I started refining the data logs for presentation. Not just saving files, but annotating them, time-stamping incidents, cross-referencing them with HOA meeting dates and neighborhood announcements. Example: date, June 19th, 2:13 a.m. Event: unauthorized charging duration, 18M47s. Location: Western Exterior Port. Additional note: earlier same day, Deborah made indirect comment during HOA meeting about neighbors with unstable energy habits. It was methodical, legal grade, cold. And yet my emotions were anything but. There were moments I doubted myself. Not because I didn't believe the facts, those were indisputable, but because of the toll it was taking. The constant tension, the waiting, the knowing something was coming but not knowing when. I lost sleep. I lost weight. I stopped watching TV. I couldn't focus on anything that didn't involve voltage or timestamps. One night I caught myself watching a 2-hour loop of her walking across my lawn on silent playback. I wasn't even logging it. I was just watching, memorizing, studying every movement, every hesitation. I'd become what I hated, not a thief, not a liar, but obsessed. And that terrified me more than her. So I forced balance back into my life. I reconnected with Brian and Sarah, invited them for a backyard dinner, bought new grill tools, cleaned the patio. It felt weird, like hosting a barbecue during a hostage negotiation, but it helped. Their kids played with chalk. Sarah brought fresh bread. Brian brought a worn-out copy of a book on property law he thought I might find useful. We didn't talk about Deborah, not directly. But when Brian looked at the outlet where it all began and said, "You've done more to protect this street than anyone else," I felt something ease inside my chest. The next few nights, I barely checked the logs, and that's when Deborah started ramping things up again. She started trying new tactics, faster plug-ins, changing the cord path, wearing gloves. Once, she used a different outlet entirely, one I hadn't seen her near in weeks. The system caught it all, but it told me something important. She knew I was watching, and that meant she was no longer operating from confidence. She was operating from fear. That's when she began tampering. I found scratches around the panel, a hairline pry mark under the edge. Nothing missing, nothing broken, just inspected. She'd tried to figure out what was tracking her. The next night, I left a note. Just one sentence taped under the outlet box where she liked to plug in, "You're not invisible." The SPPS picked up her reaction, a jolt in amperage, a half step back, then stillness. 6 full minutes of her standing there doing nothing. Then she left. She didn't charge that night, or the night after. But by the third night, she was back, and angrier. I didn't see it in her face. I wasn't spying. But I saw it in the numbers. Her movements were harsher. She jammed the plug instead of easing it in. Voltage draw spiked faster than usual. She muttered to herself again, but the mic only picked up bits. "Can't prove anything." Paranoid. He's the crazy one. Classic projection. I logged it. I tightened the system. Not legally, not aggressively, just perfectly. I re-anchored the sensors, tested voltage tolerance margins, added a redundant power backup. I wasn't planning revenge. I was planning protection. I began organizing everything for a presentation, something to be used if this went legal. A kind of digital affidavit. Videos, audio files, data charts, dates, correlations, supporting HOA policies. I added a foreword to the archive. This evidence is not vengeance. It's insurance. It exists to restore truth, not to punish. But if justice is needed, it's all here. That night, I sat on my back steps and watched the moonlight ripple across my lawn. I wasn't angry anymore. I was ready. The storm was coming. And I was the only one in the neighborhood who had an umbrella. Part 5. Public Record. The meeting that changed everything. She walked into that clubhouse thinking she owned it. She walked out knowing it was never hers to begin with. The day of the HOA meeting, the sky was overcast. Thick clouds hung low like the ceiling had been dropped over Pinewood Estates. No wind, no birds, just that stillness again. Only this time, I wasn't the only one who noticed it. Neighbors stood in their driveways, not talking, just watching. The clubhouse parking lot filled faster than I'd ever seen. Families who never showed up before, elderly residents in their lawn chairs, parents with strollers. Even Gregory, the clipboard crusader, arrived early, for once not pretending to be busy with some invisible checklist. Deborah showed up in full regalia, cashmere blazer, pearls, that perfect blowout she reserved for board meetings. Her smile was more restrained than usual, and when she walked past me, she didn't make eye contact. I carried a plain manila folder. Not flashy, not threatening, just facts. The meeting opened with the usual dry proceedings. Budget updates, a landscaping proposal, and approval for repainting speed bumps. The room was half asleep. Then came resident matters. I stood. Frank, the HOA president, blinked at me. He looked tired, deflated, as if he'd aged 10 years since Deborah first got her seat at the table. "Mr. Bailey, go ahead." I walked to the projector, plugged in my USB. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, "this won't take long, but it's necessary." The screen lit up. A time-stamped video played. Deborah, 2:09 a.m., plugging in the Tesla, gasps, murmurs. Then the second video, another date, another night. Same action, then a graph, dates, times, power usage, HOA power cost increase since her arrival, then audio. "He won't do anything. Men like that never do." Then her voice again. "They always believe me." By the time I showed the spreadsheet linking her charging to surges in HOA electric bills, the room wasn't murmuring anymore. It was silent, dead quiet. Even the HVAC system sounded like it was holding its breath. I ended the presentation with a line I'd rehearsed. "I'm not asking for punishment. I'm asking for accountability, for transparency, for our community to stop being a stage for one person's entitlement." Deborah stood, slow, measured. "This is harassment," she said. "He's obsessed. He's been watching me, filming me. None of this proves intent. None of this is illegal." I raised my hand. "I spoke with the city inspector. All recordings are from my own property. All devices are legal. All data is traceable. And—" I looked directly at her. "You were warned." From the back of the room, someone clapped. Then another. Then half the room. Even Frank exhaled like he'd been underwater. Gregory spoke next. For the first time, without his clipboard. "I move to call a vote for full restitution and removal of President Harrington from her board seat." Hands shot up, all but 3. Motion passed. She was done. She stormed out. No final words, no smug rebuttal, just silence. Outside, I watched as she climbed into her Tesla. She sat there for a long time, staring out at nothing. The storm had passed, and this time, I wasn't soaked. The week after the meeting felt unreal. There were no more violations in my mailbox, no more passive-aggressive walks past my hedges, no more 2 a.m. power spikes. Deborah's Tesla didn't move from her driveway for days. Then one morning, a flatbed tow truck came. No announcement. No drama. Just quiet hydraulics and a mechanic who didn't ask questions. He loaded up her white Model X and drove away, tail lights disappearing down the street like a closing chapter. A for sale sign appeared on her lawn 3 days later. Not one of those custom signs with fancy fonts. Just a plain white and blue realtor sign, slightly tilted, like even the ground beneath her had stopped cooperating. Neighbors talked more now. About real things, about lawn work, about baseball practice, about life. Martha dropped off banana bread. The Thompsons invited me to help coach their son's little league team. Even Gregory, clipboard retired, asked if I'd be interested in joining the HOA board. I said no. I didn't want a seat at the table. I just wanted the table to be clean. A month later, Deborah moved out. No goodbye party, no gift baskets, just a rental truck, a husband who looked 10 years older, and movers who worked in silence. I watched from my porch, not to gloat, just to witness. Closure isn't a parade. It's a sigh that doesn't need an audience. They left behind a cracked bird bath and a mailbox with one broken hinge. Symbolic. The new HOA board formed under Brian Thompson's lead. He wasn't a fighter. He was a bridge builder, transparent, fair. People trusted him because he didn't want control. He wanted peace. The board voted to install individually metered charging stations, properly funded, community approved. I helped design the infrastructure, quietly, professionally, no drama, just results. And me? I started sleeping again, really sleeping. No logs to check, no graphs to annotate, no motion alerts in the middle of the night, just dreams, some about wires, some about silence. The SPPS system is still active, not because I expect more theft, but because I believe in boundaries and in protecting the people who can't always protect themselves. Martha's community garden bloomed that spring, full of tomatoes, herbs, and sunflowers. Someone painted a small sign for it, "Grown Together." I smiled when I saw it. Because that's what came out of this. Not revenge, not humiliation, but a better version of the neighborhood we thought we had all along. And sometimes, when I sip coffee on my back porch and glance at the place where Deborah's Tesla used to sit, I remember what my grandfather used to say. Respect isn't about noise. It's about who stays standing after the noise ends. I stayed. And now the silence isn't scary anymore. It's home.